Hello. My name is Rachel Foss. I am a Chicago cartoonist. First, I'm just going to tell you guys a little bit about my background so you can see how I got into making comics. I'm originally from Michigan. Those of you who know people from Michigan know that we do this. I grew up here, I went to college here, and then for most of my life I lived over here in Grand Rapids. I went to Central Michigan University. I graduated with a degree in film and studio design. The reason why I tell you that is because obviously I'm not a famous filmmaker, because even when I was in college I realized I didn't want to do that, because you have to be a certain kind of person and kind of dirty game to really make it, or you have to like really be passionate about it, and I was neither of those things. I was really lazy. But when I got into comics, one of the best things I was able to go right into is the fact that all this ingrained of my film learning was storyboarding. You know, you do film, you do a television show, you do a TV commercial, you have to do a storyboard. And comics are just a really detailed storyboard. And what's really interesting is I'm going to show you some of my early comics, and they're really minimalist, no backgrounds, like barely any lines on them at all. And it's because I still have this problem with putting more detail in it, because I still have that storyboard kind of thing in my mind after years of being forced to do film storyboards. So when I graduated, I was doing all kinds of jobs. Like I said, I was a photographer for a little while. I worked at a photography studio, and then I got in a really bad car accident. I sprained my shoulder, I broke my wrist. Obviously, can't hold a camera when you have a broken wrist. So they fired me. So I was unemployed for a couple of months and just kind of wandering around Grand Rapids, you know, drinking a lot and laying out on the lawn. I was just like, had no idea what to do. I hadn't made art in years, didn't know if I should go back into film, blah, blah, blah. So right at that time, a friend invited me to be in this local community art show, and I accepted it. And so I had to start making art pieces for this show, which got me just drawing again and making pieces. And then at that same time, a really good friend of mine, to get me inspired, to kind of get me back on the roll, introduced me to my very first graphic novel. That's right, I didn't read comics until I was 25 years old because I thought that they only were superhero stuff. And that comic, like for most people, was Blankets by Craig Thompson. And it blew my mind. If anybody in the audience has never read this book, go buy a copy before you leave, because it is still in my mind one of the best books ever. Definitely one of the best graphic novels. It is gorgeous. I actually bought a print of this. It's hanging up in a frame in my house because I love him so much. I became very intrigued by this whole graphic novel world. Started, went to my library, got all of these comics. I was reading a Craig Thompson book outside my favorite coffee shop, and then this guy walked by and he was like, "That's a fantastic book. Would you like to come to my comics group?" And I was like, sure, because I was just getting into this new world of comics. I really wanted to learn more. So I went there, and I brought my friend Sarah, the one who introduced me to this book, and we did a jam comic. It was my first jam comic, and I was like, I don't think I can do this. I've never drawn a comic before. And they were like, just do it. And then I just did it. And then that was what was really great about it, because that is the difference between people who want to make comics and make comics, is that you just do it. You just got to sit down and you just got to do it. So going to this group was really helpful. Every week I was drawing jam comics or drawing these little drawing assignments with people, learning about other comic artists in the world. One of those people was Lucy Knisley. This was the first comic I ever read by her. It is What If Harry Potter Was Made in the 80s, and it's brilliant because, I mean, look at this. David Bowie is Voldemort. I mean, you can't go better than that, right? Well, this is the first time I really saw a girl who was my age doing what I was really interested in doing. We even have, in terms of drawing minimalist styles, very similar. She's obviously a lot better than me because she's been into comics since she was 2 years old. And so she's got a little bit ahead of the game for me. But I really started following Lucy. I really was interested in her, started following her blog, read a couple of her books that she had published through her schools, learned through following her about her school, the Center for Cartoon Studies, which she actually went to and was a graduate of, which inspired me to want to go to that school as well. So I applied, I got into the master's program, and in the fall of 2011, I moved to Vermont and went to CCS. The thing about that, though, was that when I got there, I couldn't pay for all of my tuition. So I unfortunately had to drop out of the program. So I didn't get to finish, but they were so awesome. If you guys ever are interested in going to school to get your master's in comics or fine art, it's a really fantastic school. Beth Hetland over here is a graduate as well. They also have summer workshops. You can also do what I did, is just live there for a year and just feed off of the art energy that they have. It's really fantastic. I did want to show you guys my first short story comic so you can see how terrible it is. This is a comic that I did while I was still in Grand Rapids. It's just a short story diary comic about this weird boy who hit on me and why, like, I never wear makeup, and so this was me getting ready, and then I was at work and a creepy guy hit on me. So I was like, why do I even try to do this? But obviously, that's really terrible. This is one of our jam comics. It's from about 6 months later, about our friend Ryan doing a veggie hot dog eating contest. This is my panel, because whenever I do a jam comic, I'm always the one that introduces aggression or violence. But you can see even a couple months later, I'm already improving drastically from this. This is my first short story that I did with the Grand Rapids Comics group. It's based off my friend Blair and all the crazy stories that she told me as a little kid. I just wanted to show you this to see. This was my first short story. You can see no backgrounds. It's amazing that I have a background in that one, because actually the rest of the book doesn't have any backgrounds because I wasn't used to drawing backgrounds. You can see how minimal it is. There's not a lot of detail. Her face looks kind of weird. It's kind of not formed properly. But this was my first real short story that I actually printed out and bound and stapled and like gave to people. So that's where I was. So this was my CCS comic. In order to apply for the school, you have to do a 1 to 3 page comic, and it has to have certain elements. I believe it has to have a ship, a snowman, a piece of fruit, an animal, and a robot, and maybe something else. So this was my comic, and it's just me with a spider in my room. I yell for my roommate. She comes in and kills the spider, and I'm really happy. I'm guessing that they let me into the program based on my other portfolio and my ability to tell stories, because again, this is not that high quality of art, but I had only been drawing comics for a year at this point, so I didn't really have the skill. By the way, I started drawing comics when I was 25. That was 2009, so it's only been 4 years since I've been drawing comics. So while I was at CCS, once I had to drop out of the program, I just stayed. I was able to go to lectures. They actually let me have like an unofficial internship, so I was able to work with visiting artists, go to workshops. I still got a lot of privileges with that school. I really learned a lot still. But I didn't want to just sit there and do nothing just because I wasn't in classes. So I gave myself a project to do. And it was supposed to be a personal learning experience for me. It's called Haiku Review. It's basically just every couple weeks I made a haiku comic, which means that every word of the haiku is a haiku. So this was actually inspired by a project that we did at the Grand Rapids Comics group. This was my first haiku I ever did. It's about me moving to Vermont and how scared and nervous I was to do it. You can see it's a haiku, packing up items, my life fits into a box, change can be so hard. And I really liked how this turned out. And I realized that a really good project for me to get me to tell story, like get used to telling stories in a short time, as a haiku, because you have only 3 panels to tell a story in, and that's kind of a challenge. But also what's great about this book is that every time I learned something new, a new technique, a new pen, if a visiting artist came and I learned how he did his work, I had to implement something new into every haiku. So I did this project for a full year, and I have a little mini of it. I only have 2 copies here for sale if you guys are interested, but I'm happy to send somebody one if they're interested. But what I want you to see is that this was made in 2011, in like the spring of 2011, and this is the last page a year later. This is after a year of being in Vermont working with CCS, and it's such a different skill level. Like, this is very wobbly and not very crisp. This has a lot more elements. I'm challenging myself. It's a little more risky, but that's how the book is, and you can see the transition, and that's why it was so important to me. I just use this as a learning tool. It is my best-selling book, which I don't understand, but I literally sell out of it at every comics festival and book festival I go to. So people, I think, really respond to the autobiographical honesty that's in these books. They say write what you know, and that's what this book is. They're all autobio, and I think people can respond to the sad ones and the happy ones and the awkward sexy ones and blah blah blah. So it wasn't expected. It was only supposed to be for me, but everybody likes it, so I keep printing them. But that's why I only have 2 copies left right now. So after I was done with Haiku Review, I started doing diary comics again. And this is a lot better skill-wise than the first one I show you, as you can see. I learned a very important technique when it comes to comics, and that is spot blacks. It kind of changed my life. It's something that you don't know until you know it, but it really makes it look like a comic now. This was the first color one that I did. I did this about a year and a half ago. It's just about me getting a new front tooth because I had broken it in a bike accident, and then I threw up on my dentist. Oh. That's basically what it was. But I'm really learning a lot. I'm learning how to lay out panels. Obviously my writing and my word bubbles are so much better skill-wise than they were before. These lines are intentional. They go in this way because it's supposed to go this way. Like I'm learning all these new techniques after a year at this school, and it's just working hard. It's just working every day. And the reason why I wanted to show you guys like this process is because I meet so many people that are like, oh, I wish I could draw. I wish I could draw as good as you. But you can. You want me to show you that first panel again? I guarantee right now you draw better than that page. But it's a skill like anything else. It needs to be sharpened. You need to draw every day. My friend Matt Reedsma, who's the one who started that Grand Rapids Comics group and invited me, he coined the phrase, draw every day. And if you guys have ever heard of Alec Longstreth, really good friends with Matt, he wears a t-shirt all the time that says Matt's saying, draw every day, because he knows how important it is. Draw every day. So I left Vermont after a year, moved here to Chicago. I needed a new project. Haiku Review was done. I didn't just want to make diary comics for myself. I needed something to keep me going, something to put in a book. So I had this short story in mind. It's about just like this girl living alone, and she has this interesting tryst in the middle of the day, and but you kind of get the sense that maybe there's someone else that's not even in the story that she'd rather be with. It's kind of a sad comic. It's kind of a downer, but I really like telling stories that while you're reading them, you're reading the story, and then by the last page you're like, oh, this story was about something else. Kind of in the light of Miranda July, if anyone's ever read her short stories. She does that a lot. So this is the first page of Empty Bed. I started this a year ago when I first moved to Chicago. Already you see an even more improvement. I mean, for the first time I have really detailed backgrounds, which I've never had before. I try to put detail in all these hashings. The one thing you have to learn about this book is that I had a deadline with it because I did a talk on it this past winter, so I had to get it done really quickly. But I had a concussion in the middle of drawing this book, and it took me a couple weeks to even be able to write my name again, let alone draw a comic. So This is what the second half of the comic looks like. I mean, you can see a vast skill difference. It was something that I rushed, and I kind of regret that. I mean, I'm glad that I was able to finish this project, but if I had waited a couple more months, it would have probably been a lot better looking. But that's the way it is for now. I can redo it in the future if I'd like. But I'm actually really proud of this book. I never sell any of it because it's a little more expensive. But I think it's a really good story. It's gotten good reviews by some critique people on the internet. Robert Clough said that it was, how did he put it? He said that I have a way of moving people and telling a story outside of the frame that he's never seen before, but that I'll be a good cartoonist someday, which, as much as I'd love to be that prodigy girl, I think he hit it on the head. You know, I think that my strong point is the storytelling, not necessarily the art yet. Like I said, I've been doing this for 4 years. They say that it takes 10 years to master your craft. I have 6 more years to go, and that's fine. I'll still draw every day. I'm still gonna make comics. This is a diary comic that I did once I finished Empty Bed. Already, it's still a better skill level than the first diary comic you did. This is two or 3 years after my first diary comic. It's a vast improvement, right? I'm learning how to use spot color. There's only one color in this whole comic, but I think it works really well. I forgot to warn you guys that most of my comics are sad. I'm not a sad person. You can see me, I'm smiling, I'm a pretty cool person. But one of the things I like about comics is that I can put any kind of sadness or angst in them. People respond to my sad comics because some people don't have happy Mother's Days, and they need someone, like, I want to provide something for someone who doesn't have it. And you'd never really see those kinds of things. Like, I'm so tired of romantic stories ending happily because I've never had a romantic story end happily. I don't even know what that's like. I can't write about that because I'm still single, and that's just not happened. The kind of same ideas here. So some of my stuff is happy, most of it isn't, and I'm okay with that. All right, so now we're up to date. This is my new project. It's called The Wandering Fox. It starts on October 1st. It's going to be a webcomic, like a real legit webcomic with its own website and everything. I hope it works because I've never done a webcomic or run a website before, so I don't know what's going to happen. The Wandering Fox is based on my actual family history. Every character in this story are real people from my family. There'll be no fake people unless it's like a farmer that like walks by. It's been a really interesting and cool experience. Just researching and like finding these actual facts has been really fun. While doing that, I've been finding new stories that my family are like, oh, you're writing about this? Did you hear about this? Like, while doing this, I found out that my great aunt killed all her children and buried them in the backyard. And that's not something I ever heard before until this summer. And that's a terrible thing that happened. That's going to make a really good story in my comic someday when I get to that part of the family. The first part is about my mother's dad, Sidney Stocker. He was from southern England, Cornwall. He was in the mining area, very famous down there. He emigrated in 1899 to the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. The reason why I really like that story is because he was a poor man from a working class mining family, and he married my great grandma, who was the daughter of a diamond mine owner. And the reason why they met is because he moved to the Upper Peninsula to work at one of the brand new copper mines that was like booming, who her father owned. And she was, I guess, hated her dad and was like, F you, Dad, I'm gonna marry this miner. And they got married. But they must have really liked each other because they had 9 children. My grandmother is the baby of 9 kids, so it's going to be really fun. I've heard so many stories about all of her brothers and sisters, so that's going to be in the comic eventually. This is a really, really scary and exciting project because it's such a commitment, even just this past week, I found out that one of my research things was wrong. And I had to quickly change part of my comic to make that happen. So once this launches, and if I find out something was actually true, there's no going back. That's going to be what my story is, and I just got to roll with it. And it's also a commitment because this is going to be years of a webcomic, because it's 4 different sides of a family going back 4 to 8 generations, depending on which ancestor it is. So there's a lot of stories to tell. But you guys get to see a sneak peek. I just put a couple of slides in here. They're not all finished because I procrastinated about this presentation, and I only did it like an hour before I came here. So not all of it looks really good, but you guys get to see the first couple of pages. I also should warn you that Cornish accents are really hard because they're kind of a mix between like a rough Southern English accent, a Welsh, and a Scottish accent. And I practiced all day for this presentation, and I can't do it. So as I read it, pretend like you're listening to Hagrid from Harry Potter or Mrs. Hughes from Downton Abbey, because that's kind of the accurate way a Cornish person sounds, like a mixture of those two. So St. Austell, Cornwall, England, March 1896. These are all based on real historic photos. Everything, I try to make everything that is real, a war, a place, a time, to be as historically accurate as possible. And that's my great-grandfather when he's 16 years old, Sydney Stocker. And can I just point out that this was like the most fun panel I've drawn in a long time. That's all I wanted to say. Morning, Ma. Morning. You're gonna be late. I packed you lunch. Will you be home for dinner? Afraid not. I'm working an extra shift. I left something for your dad, but he'll probably eat at the pub. Thanks, Ma. And you can't read that because I didn't clean up this page yet. But this says mine whistle, because this was a really big mining town. He was not a miner. The story that's going to be behind this is that his dad was a tin miner. All the tin mines closed down around this time because they discovered china clay, which is what modern day porcelain is made out of, and it was a huge industry. And so they basically fired all of the tin miners and brought in china clay workers. So a lot of people lost their job. It was actually a documentary about this whole thing. It's called, interestingly enough, Stocker's Copper, which is my family name, but I don't know if it was based on that. So it's basically he has to work as a farmhand to help bring in money for the family because his dad got fired from the tin mine. So he's going to one of the local farm, which was actually a farm during that time, the Rao farm. So he's going there. Morning, Sid. Morning, Mr. Rao. Ugh. Why don't you get started with milking the cows? Then you can work on the south wall. Aye, Mr. Rao. So this is just what I wanted to show you guys about my process. We saw this panel over here. This is what it looks like before I ink it and clean it up. I use a blue scanner pencil, very popular with a lot of cartoonists. It's really great because when you scan it, you can turn off the ability for that color to scan, and it just will print my inks, which is how this really happened once I inked it all. But you can see like the differences, you know, the cleaning up, the sizes of things. Trying to show, like, she doesn't really have a head here because when I drew it the first time, I didn't like the way it was shaped, so I inked over it in a different way. Ah, there we go. And then so you can see that this, you know, head is there now. Yeah. So that's basically it. I do want to invite you guys on October 1st to check out the new webcomic. You will have already seen these pages. It'll be a couple of weeks before you see some new pages. So lucky you guys. It's going to be at thewanderingfox.wix.com, but you can get it through this site if you want it down. I also have business cards here and at the front desk. I will be posting a link to the actual webcomic site from my blog site, because this is kind of my hub where I do, you can find my Twitter, my Tumblr, and everything else, my email, if you ever need anything. If you guys are interested in buying a few books, I have them up front. I don't have that many, but if you're interested in buying any of the books that you saw here, you can come talk to me, and we'll raise money up. We can go in the back alley and do a secret trade. Right. Thanks for coming, every guy. Oh yeah, I forgot questions.
Does anybody have any questions? I had one to start with.
Yeah.
So I'm really curious, this project about your family. It sounds like it's almost like so you're sort of doing like an oral history of your family with your relatives, and then deciding kind of what the story arc and the narratives are. Is that stuff you all knew, or I mean, you alluded to some knowledge. Or is this all what's driving you? I guess is what I'm getting at. Did you want to know all this? And
it's definitely something I've grown up with. Like that story about my great grandmother, great grandfather meeting. That's been, I don't even know when I first heard that story. That's been there my whole life. I'm also part Native American, and that's been a really huge part of my life. It's something that not a lot of people who first meet me know, because I look really white, but I actually did have to go to Native American classes when I was little, up until I was 12 years old, actually. And that's a big part of my history that I never really get to talk about, and I honestly don't know that much about. After, in the middle of summer, after the Chicago Alternative Comics Expo was over, I was just laying in bed and thinking, what do I do next? And the reality is that my grandparents are out the door, basically. They're not going to make it around much longer, and so I had them in my mind and kind of just thinking of a legacy I can keep for them. And then it just kind of came to me while I was pondering all these things laying in bed, and I was like, that'll be a brilliant plan, because it's something that I'm passionate about. I've always been passionate about my ancestry. I'm very into history and things like that, and on top of loving telling stories through comics and stories through art, it just kind of seemed to fit and just light bulb make sense. A lot of it is going to be a lot of research. The hardest one is going to be the Native American side, which is why I didn't start with it, because it's too hard to find. But it really is, I believe that people are not only products of their environment, they're products of their history. One example of that that's going to be in this part of the comic is that I really love fried green tomatoes. Well, my grandmother hates them, but I know her dad loved them. And there's a really cool story about when he first came to America. He didn't have tomatoes in southern England. There weren't tomatoes. They're not native to southern England. So he came in through Ellis Island, and he thought this was a green apple. And so he bought it because he was really hungry from the boat ride. It was the first thing he did, was went to a market and bought this green tomato and took a bite out of it, and he was like, what the fuck is that? That's not an apple. But it's such a part of me now, because we have this connection. I've never met that grandfather. He was dead before I was born. But we still have this family connection, and it's those little things that I kind of want to put throughout the story. So it's things like that.
Cool. Anybody else? Any questions?
It's kind of a vague question, but you talked a lot about being dedicated to improving what you're doing. And I guess, do you rely on peer critique or finding new tools, or how does that instinct, how do you...
It does. I unfortunately don't have a lot of peer critique. I don't even know that many people in Chicago in general, and the few people that I do know some of them are comic artists. So peer critique is not really something that I have a lot of access to. What I did over the summer was I did portraits of myself while looking at other famous artists' work to copy their style. And so I just have a sketchbook page full of my face trying to copy, you know, Daniel Klaus or Adrian Tamine or Craig Thompson or Alison Bechtel. I just look at them and I'm like, I gotta do this style. And so it's just practicing these different styles. That's been my latest thing. With this one, actually, one thing I can point out with like this, this, I actually did all, you can't see it in here because this screen is kind of small, but I did all of the things of the wood grain. And the reason why I was inspired to do that is because I just finished a graphic novel called The Cursed Pirate Girl by Jeremy Bastian, which is a crazy looking, awesome comic. And it looks like a bunch of copper etchings that have been printed, but super detailed. And he draws like every line of everything. And so it's really just other artists who inspired me to try to copy what they do. And the reason why I showed you Lucy's and Craig Thompson's was because they're two huge inspirations of my work. And you can see that just in, I stole that from Craig Thompson. I mean, that's something that I look at his work and I say, I want to be flowy and brushy just like him. I mean, that's directly from him. So that's really mostly what it is. It's, I don't know. That's really it. It's just copying everybody else.
Is that pencil brush pen?
Yes. Half of this comic is Pentel brush, half of it is micron. Like the wood grain is micron, but his face is all brush. This is micron, but that's brush. You know, his butt is brush.
Oh, that's great.
And so you're putting up a new strip per week?
Yeah, it'll be every Tuesday.
Every Tuesday, so you said
Every
a day
Tuesday.
that there'll be the day that it...
Yep. Just once a week, just because I don't have time right now to do more than that. I wish I did. Otherwise, I'd do it Tuesday, Thursday, like
Well,
most
once a week
webcomics.
is a lot. So, and then do you anticipate eventually that being a book, and this is a way to kind of get the work done? And
Yeah, I think that by the time con season rolls around in 2014, starting with Chicago Zine Fest, that's usually when I start my year off, I'll have at least one chapter. So you'll probably see the first chapter of... The first chapter will just be Sidney Stocker and his whole story up until he goes to America. And then it's going to jump to a different family. And then later on, we'll go back to Sidney Stocker, and that'll be his life when he is living in Michigan. So it's going to be broken up into different kind of eras. So it will first be the webcomic, and then it will be chapters, and then 5 years from now, it might be a whole book. I don't know.
How far in advance do you plan to put out? I mean, it sounds like you're juggling a lot of different pieces, and it sounds awesome. All of these different parts is essentially 4 sides of the family. I'm just curious how far, as far as your writing process goes, how far in advance do you cultivate?
I have one whole notebook dedicated to just this comic, and that notebook is full of different, just one-sentence stories of what my sister and grandparents tell me, or what my dad said about such and such part of my family, and I write that down just so I can remember it in the future. And then a whole another section of it is the actual scripts and outline of what I'm doing in those couple of pages. So, like the comics that I showed you guys, I did a short, again, I'm going back to my movie heritage because we write scripts before we do anything. And I literally wrote a film script, basically, and it showed, it's very much like Sydney walks in, everything. So I do that, and then I do quick blue pencil sketches that are really simple. And I do a bunch of those at a time, and then when I feel like I want to stop doing those and kind of get those ready, then I ink them. So it's definitely cut up in different pieces of what I can handle. Right now I have 2 months worth of this webcomic done, which I wanted to have before it started, which is why I didn't want to do it until October 1st. And that way I can work on it while this webcomic is going on. So it's definitely going to be something that I'm half doing while it's happening, but it is slightly. But I don't do what CCS told us to do, which is thumbnailing. I never thumbnail. I hate thumbnailing. I never do it. I know I'm supposed to. I don't do it. If you do it, great. It's a really good thing to do. I don't do it.